Welcome to the second DeepCrawl Deep Dive. Welcome back to anyone that joined our first session, and warm welcome to any newcomers. Today, as you're probably aware, we're going to be looking at core web vitals. Just should probably be sharing my screen. That would be helpful. There we go. So, in case for any new people, I'm going to be the host of this series. So I'm Dave. I joined DeepCrawl way back when in 2015. Worn many hats since I've joined, and they keep changing. I'm now hosting webinars, one of my many bows. But I know that none of you are here to talk to me or listen to me. So I've got two of my esteemed colleagues with me. I have Josh Sciortino, who's joining us all the way from LA. Josh is a huge part of our customer success leadership team. He's an SEO at heart, and he's consulted for many of our clients in the past. So some of you may even know Josh. And then we also have Julia Hudson, who is a former SEO and is now responsible for a lot of the cool and amazing things that you see in our platform. So, we're in very good hands with two very good people. So what we're going to do today, and before we kind of like dive into their part of today's webinar, I'm going to give everyone a bit of context of like why we're talking about this, in case you've you think that core web vitals has come out of nowhere, and perhaps you've lived under a rock for the last year, which, to be honest, doesn't sound like a bad idea in hindsight. But we'll do some housekeeping. So there's a Q&A box at the bottom. So for anyone that wants to submit any questions, ask the experts, then please do so. And we'll ask those at the end as long as we have enough time. There's also going to be a short survey at the very end, which will take about less than a minute. And that will help us kind of tailor this program to make sure that we are delivering the content that you want and need. And this also going to be shared as part of a blog post after. So there'll be a write-up and the recording for you to watch on demand. So core web vitals. What the bloody hell is core web vitals? What does it mean? What does it want from us? Why have we got another update coming? Why does this keep happening? Well, I mean, I suppose that, this is part of Google's agenda to, force us to build better websites and experiences for users. It isn't new. Google has been kind of focusing our attention through various different ways over the years through algorithms. Everyone kind of panics about an algorithm and tries to not be one of kind of the losers. And we're always kind of constantly reminding that we're sometimes at the behest of Google. But this one in particular is part of a wider, larger page experience update. We know now that there's this increasing shift between SEO and UX, and we know, I think the Chromium blog did a study and found that users are 24% less likely to abandon a page load if they meet these thresholds, which means that it obviously impacts organic traffic, but it actually affects all traffic. If your pages are loading, quickly, efficiently, they're not kind of moving around all over the place, then other traffic sources that your website's getting will also have better conversion rates and interactivity on the page. So that's kind of why we're here, what we're talking about today. I'm going to hand over to Josh and Julia now to kind of talk through this and share some ideas. So Josh, over to you.
Yeah, so when we're talking about why this update is a game changer, right? This is what we're kind of putting out in some of our marketing. Just to be clear, this is not necessarily going to be a game changer for every site, but this is a game changer in the way that SEOs should approach their SEO, should approach design, because it represents a fundamental shift in the way that Google is able to identify which pages are performing well and how to rank them appropriately. Previously it's only been indirect metrics. We can assess how fast a page renders by whether or not people are bouncing back, for example. And now with Core Web Vitals, there's able to be direct measure by field data that Google's able to collect from their Chrome browser in Crux on how that's actually performing and rank people appropriately based on that. So the page experience update, it includes all of that in Core Web Vitals. It also includes mobile issues, which for a couple of years now, we should all have been focusing on, the viewport's not set, there's clickable elements too close together. That's all been trackable in Google Search Console for a couple of years now. And then there's also security issues, anything around non-secure protocol or mixed content, stuff like that. So all of those comprise the page experience update. So the reason we say this is a game changer is because it is a fundamental shift in the way that Google is able to accurately, robots, right? Accurately understand the performance of an actual page and rank it accordingly. And I think sometimes when we're consulting with our customers, we get a different kind of array. Some customers are really scared because it is that sort of shift of how it's going to affect them. And others kind of realize that, maybe because it's just kind of becoming a ranking factor, but they've already been focusing on it, or it's already been indirect kind of signals, that they understand that maybe it's not going to, in their own site in isolation, have a major effect. But that's the purpose of having a tool like DeepCrawl, so that we can start to crawl the site and get some of these metrics before it actually becomes a direct ranking factor, and so we can prepare our customers for it. So let me talk about, this is the core of what we want to talk about today. And Julia is going to go a little bit into, speaking to product. She's going to talk a little bit about exactly how we're going to help you audit and monitor. She's going to show you some of the reports and how they're measured. But just to speak conceptually, how to monitor, audit, and interpret data on our platform. The way that we want to help you prepare for Core Web Vitals is to help give you those insights, right? Especially if you're launching a new section of the site. This is a good kind of example to give, because if you're launching a new section of your site, you really don't have any idea of what the Core Web Vitals are going to be. You're launching blind because Google hasn't had a chance to look at it yet. So that's a really good use case for a crawler like DeepCrawl, because we're able to crawl and get you those insights, get you that lab data for every URL before you can launch live. Another way that we can really help equip our customers is doing competitor analysis, because when it comes to page speed and everything performance related, it ultimately comes down to how you're comparing against your competitors. Right? If you're all doing really poor, you have really poor CLS, really poor FID, Google's not going to just say, okay, well, when it comes to this product, I'm not going to serve anything. It's sort of a zero-sum game. And so you've got market share to compete against each other. And so what we found in our customers is when we're able to do crawls at scale, right, and get you that lab data, which may not exist for every page on your site, because in terms of field data, because not every page on every site gets traffic enough for Google to calculate field data. So that's the importance, and that's the benefit of an enterprise crawler like DeepCrawl. And we're the only one who's able to do it at scale and get you that lab data. Once you're able to do that, we can then do that for your competitors and see, okay, here's what your average CLS is by template. Here's what your competitor is. And then you have a better sense of what you should prioritize in terms of which of your Core Web Vitals or which of your issues overall. Because then you know, okay, well, they're already doing good in this area. Maybe let's focus on this area that they're not doing as well as, or vice versa. So that's just to speak generally. I'm gonna hand it off to Julia at this stage before we get a little bit more specific into kind of some of the products that we can and services we can upsell into. And she's going to show you a little bit about what this looks like on our platform. On this call, we have some current customers and we've got some not current customers as well. So.
Hello. Hi, guys. I joined DeepCrawl a couple of months ago, so it's been a really interesting time to have the Core Web Vitals update coming the entire time that I've been at DeepCrawl. And it's been really interesting to see all the different ways you could lay out some of this data. And I think one thing we're really proud of as a product is that we are giving you a very comprehensive view of your data. So I'm going to walk you through how the core product works. And actually, Dave, if you want to move forward just one slide, we can show. Thank you so much. So this is just a little quick overview of your homepage for Core Web Vitals. You'd go into, there's a performance area of your, I don't want to say dashboard, a performance dashboard within your crawl data. And assuming you've set up a crawl with JavaScript rendering, which would be course required in order to get this kind of load data, you'll be confronted with a page like this. And what you'll see here is, actually, if it's looping too much, we can pause just so nobody gets nauseous. That's my fault for making too short a video. I can own that. We have all of the key metrics lined up here vertically, and then we have what's considered good performance, medium performance, and bad performance. And we're using the same standards that Google uses when we're making those designations. So at a glance, you can see in your performance overview report exactly kind of how you're doing in different areas. What we're also doing over on the right-hand side where you see red and green is we're comparing this crawl against your previous crawl. It really helps to have nice comprehensive crawls, or at least some consistency, obviously, so we can give you these kinds of comparisons. What we want to be able to do here, and for those of you who are familiar with the DeepCrawl platform, we do this in kind of a number of our reports, is we give you an overview and then really help you drill down, and you can get very, very specific. So if you already know what you're looking for, great, easy enough to navigate to there. But if you don't yet know what you're looking for and you're looking for either issues or opportunities, we're trying to lay this out in such a way that you can start to find exactly where you want to spend your time. Because as I remember very well, there's a million places you can spend your time as an SEO, and we want to help you kind of prioritize what's best for you and your business. So as I said, we do use Google's own definitions for what is considered good and bad performance. And what we also try to do all throughout the product is make sure that we're using tooltips with kind of plain language, so that when you're communicating with your stakeholders, you can also easily explain, or they can explain for themselves if they're coming in kind of without your guidance, what they're actually looking at. So hopefully that is fairly clear. And the other thing that we do on this overview report, as you can see in that second column, is we give you historical trend data. And so DeepCrawl is a really great tool for ongoing monitoring of your website. And so the more crawls you're doing, the more frequently, especially if they're comprehensive, the better you're going to find the experience when you're looking at things like this kind of historical trend. More data points, always better. And of course, you can do this if your crawl isn't the entire site and you're just looking at, like Josh was saying, like a new section of your website. Great, you can really look at that quite granularly, but hopefully this view is still a useful overview. Because we do compare against, your previous crawl, what we also have in these kind of right-hand columns, actually in all of these views, is where new URLs might have moved in since your last crawl to a different category, or they might have moved out, or maybe there are URLs that are now missing. So sometimes, again, in that overview at a glance, there's a lot of information there, but hopefully we're helping you kind of see where you're moving, what direction you're moving in. Great, so looking at these, we have, these are the two secondary tabs on that overview page. So you're still in your performance overview, but you have some other tabs as well that show you issues and changes. So issues is on the left, changes on the right. If you're familiar with our platform, one thing that we do in a lot of our dashboards is we show you what we consider to be issues. And we have, based on kind of our professional services team's experience, we weight those issues according to the severity of the issue and how many URLs that issue is showing up on. So this image on the left is where we're looking at just the issues for this example site that I was crawling. And what we do here is we actually narrow to just performance related issues. So if you know you're coming in and you just want to work with performance and Core Web Vitals and speed metrics, come right in here and you're not going to get any noise. It's all going to be around performance. And for each issue, you can drill down. So, and again, this is a common behavior. So if you've used our platform, you'll know it already, but you can drill right down. You can find the specific URLs where each issue is found so that you can investigate and resolve them. Sorry, just on that previous one, sorry, this is tough because Dave's trying to navigate and read my mind at the same time. So I didn't make things easy for him. So the changes tab is just the metrics that have changed since the last crawl. So hopefully self-explanatory, but whether the change is positive or negative, and it does sort by default to show the metric with the greatest number of changes by number of URLs first, so that we're kind of hopefully from the moment you come in, we've sorted things in a way that brings your attention to your highest risks first or your greatest opportunities. Cool. Sorry, Dave. Now I will stop messing you around. And so this is where you can dive deeper. So on any of those 3 tabs on the previous overview, what you can do is just drill down into something you're finding interesting. So when you have said, okay, I want to look in this particular issue, or I want to look at this particular performance metric and how all the good performing URLs here, good performing, what is grammar? You're going to see a page that looks like this. And on the top left, where you have that pie chart, that's organized to show the proportion of URLs at your kind of good, medium, and poor performance levels. Again, the Google definition of those. And no matter whether I'm in the good, the medium, or the poor performance drill down, I'm going to see that same pie chart because it's looking at everything in those 3 categories. And then you see all the relevant URLs below that. And if you were to click through, you'll be taken to our page report, which is a very detailed report, so that you can look at all the things that you might want to start fixing on that page. So yeah, overall, our goal is to maintain the general deep crawl experience. If you know our platform, it should be hopefully rather intuitive. If not, we always welcome that feedback. And we want to make it really easy to focus on specific pages and specific issues, while also making sure you can scan at a high level and see what you want to focus on. So yeah, I feel like I just raced through a lot of things, but that's a main overview of this section of our product.
I think one of the questions that we get sometimes, an important thing, and Julia highlighted this, is that we're reporting on the pages that fall into those 3 thresholds. And that's the same way that Google Search Console reports on it as well. Many of you are familiar when you've gone into the Crux report in GSC, it can give you an example of some that are needs improvement or poor. And just a little note on that language, when Google is combining the Core Web Vitals into one, they have them as needs improvement or poor. But when they're isolating them to just speaking to one of the Core Web Vitals, the language may be poor, average, or fast, or things like that. So sometimes the language differs a little bit. But what Google Search Console doesn't do is show you for every URL. And some of you are probably familiar with this. You've gone into GSC and you're like, okay, let me look at some of these. And it'll give you a sample. It'll say, here's a few URLs that are similar to this page, we think, that also score kind of the same. But they're not going to tell you at scale. And so that is really one of the most core benefits that we're really proud of, is that we're able to get you that lab data at scale for every URL that you crawl on your site.
Yeah, and I think I actually found myself taking notes while you were talking, not to big you up, Josh, but I think some of the use cases you came up with are really strong arguments for using lab data in context, of course, with whatever other tools you're finding useful. But if you're launching a new part of your website, or if you're doing a migration, or we know from SEO that you can only test in the live environment, really, because Googlebot only lives in the live environment, which is incredibly dangerous. So to be able to have scaled lab data before you put things into production, I mean, again, when I was doing this work back in the day, it would have been so much more useful than what I was actually doing, which was taking terrifying risks. So.
I always forget that you were in SEO because you're just so focused on our product now and doing great at it. Yeah, but when it comes to these insights, PageSpeed Insights. You're not going to get that at scale. There's an API, yes, and I think a non-cloud crawler competitor is able to kind of connect to that, but it's limited because Google limits that. So you're only able to do it for 25,000 URLs. You know, our professional services team, which is definitely an option for people who don't have professional services, because they're able to then help you make the most of your Core Web Vitals reports and help you prioritize and really find what that LCP element is, right? Because LCP is the largest contentful paint item. That's most often a video or an image on publisher sites and e-commerce sites. It's usually that big main header, the hero image or the product image, but it may not always be. And so we have a script on our professional services team where we can actually run through every URL in your crawl and output the file of whatever that element it is. Sometimes it's a big text block, but that's really rare, just because then you'd have to be devoid of any video or image element that's going to be comparable in byte size to a big text block, and that's obviously just not very common. So yeah, we have a script where we can actually surface you those insights at scale. And we do have access to the PageSpeed Insights script, so we can get you that data at scale too, but that's again going to be limited to the API limits of 25,000 URLs. As I was talking about in Crux and GSC as well, that is just going to be samples. So while you can go to PageSpeed Insights and you can get some field data and lab data. If any of you have ever put one URL into PageSpeed Insights, you've seen it shows you some lab data, right, and some field data. And just to cover on that real quick, that anybody that may not know, lab data just means we're doing it here in the lab. We've only got one sample. We're running it for you just on that one page. This is what we've got. Field data, think of it like anthropology, collecting actual data from the field. So it's going to be that one person who loaded your page on their phone as they were going through the subway tunnel and it cut off. But it's also going to be that person who was at home on their mobile phone and connected to their Wi-Fi. So it was really going to be aggregated. That's real user metrics. That's that Chrome aggregated user experience. That's the Crux data. So that's the field data. It's just the difference between the two is that, you know, if you've ever seen this message in PageSpeed Insights where it says we don't have enough real world data for this page, so there's just not going to be any field data. And if you follow the Pareto principle, at least loosely, that's going to be the case for many of the pages on your site. But again, you know, that's the benefit of DeepCrawl is we can get you that data for every single page on your site. I want to address, since it's kind of leading naturally into it right now, one of the questions. And if any question comes in, definitely feel free to answer, ask any questions, because we've definitely got time for that. We wanted to build that in for y'all. Does user agent affect Core Web Vitals? In short, yes. The way it affects it is, so we've got 3 Core Web Vitals, right? Actually, Julia showed you all of the performance reports that we report on. Even before Core Web Vitals was a ranking metric, were metrics at all, sorry. DeepCrawl's always had performance metrics to try to emulate and report to our customers some sort of semblance of what performance might look like. We had TTI, TTFB, time to interactive, time to first byte, fetch time, and things like that. Now, when it comes to the 3 actual Core Web Vitals, we've got cumulative layout shift, which is based on viewport size, and then LCP, largest contentful paint, which is going to be based on the actual speed of your connection and server to be able to render that. FID, first input delay, no cloud crawler can report on that, and that's just by the nature of the fact that it actually requires human user interaction. That's the input from the user clicking. What is the delay time for the browser to be able to respond to that request? So that's something that's only ever going to be available via field data, because there's no, we're not there yet when it comes to AI to be able to collect that. So when it comes to LCP and Core Web Vitals, we do run on a broadband speed. We've got very fast servers that we run all our crawls on, obviously, because we are an enterprise cloud crawler. We do not throttle our speed to try to emulate mobile. And in fact, you'll see this when you run in PageSpeed Insights, how there's the mobile and desktop score. What they're doing, because you're actually running that on your home internet connection for the mobile score, what they're doing is throttling that to try to emulate that for lab data. We don't do that. So some of the scores may be a little bit more generous. But again, we're getting that data at scale for every URL. So it is going to be directionally accurate, and we can trend that. And that's not something you're going to be able to do in any of these. So it's really important that you're at least running JavaScript enabled crawls. If you don't have JavaScript, you're missing out on this huge opportunity right now that is a game changer for the whole industry. So definitely reach out to your CSM and make sure that that's included. It's really rare that people don't. We just have a couple customers that have been with us for a long time that before JavaScript rendering was even a kind of an important thing that are still kind of in that situation. So you want to make sure that that's included. So when it comes to user agent for LCP, there is not going to be a difference. For CLS, however, so we don't throttle to try to emulate mobile speed. We're always going to run at that same speed. When we're using a mobile user agent, we do, however, use a mobile viewport. We do use a mobile viewport when you're crawling with a mobile user agent, and a desktop viewport when you're crawling with a desktop user agent. So for CLS, cumulative layout shift, right, which is how much the page shifts during render. If you've ever been on a page, as it's loading, you click an element and it shifts down and you click something else and you get really frustrated. That's what Google's trying to prevent. So that's what CLS is. That can differ between different viewport sizes and different browsers. So yes, that is going to change in DeepCrawl, how it's reported on, whether you're using a desktop or mobile user agent. And that's good. It's good news. That's what we want to see. Because we can run a desktop crawl, and then we can run a mobile crawl in the same project in DeepCrawl and kind of see what changes based on that. We do parity crawls like that a lot, just change one element and see what effect that would have.
And I think actually just to emphasize something that you were just saying, which caught my ear, we're talking a lot about, trending data, and that is really important. So again, when we're talking about any kind of speed metric, we know that there's so many different variables that can influence that because we're talking about the human experience, and that's going to be completely dependent on your location, your signal, your device, your browser, whatever, that day. How are things going that day in the world of your servers? So what's really important, we certainly advise that you use multiple sources. We just think DeepCrawl is a very reliable and consistent source to have in the mix. And one of the reasons I think it's so important is being able to trend. You can have consistent crawls, consistently set up, and then you're going to get consistent data. So, okay, is something objectively X number of milliseconds? Maybe, but what's really important is to know whether you just spiked or dropped, depending on which metric you're looking at. And I think that is something that often gets lost in the conversation about speed, because a lot of people are thinking in absolute speeds. What we really want to be thinking about is relative performance, because as Josh was saying, it's a zero-sum game. It's not about your absolute performance. It's about all the people that you're fighting for space with in the rankings. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there as well.
Great insights. And I think that point that you make, Julia, is very important. We should be one of many tools in the kit bag. We've also had another, and also Jonathan, great question. Thanks for asking. Also had a couple more questions. One from Anand, who asks, based on Google's Docs, there is a bit of confusion on whether Core Web Vitals is only mobile scores or whether it will also use desktop scores. Some articles out there indicate the latter two. So what's the kind of latest take on both of those platforms? Should the priority be mobile or should it be both?
I think I saw some communiques going around about this. One thing that I love working at DeepCrawl is we've got some really brilliant people here. And any of you that do have a professional services engagement, we've got some smart people on that team. I used to be on that team, probably was not one of the smart ones. Now I'm heading up our customer success side here in the Americas. But a couple of those, are Google Gold product experts as well. And they're often hangouts with John Mueller and Martin Splitt and the rest of those brilliant people. And so we get to kind of glean some of the information that's going around about that. I don't have the latest information on that I haven't been staying as up to date in the latest in SEO since I moved into my new role. But what I can surmise is, based on some of the tools, and I think all of us that are SEOs know that Google's, even their own tools are not all up to date with each other, how they're reporting, and then they're moving and as they're launching new things. Some of the tools are going to continue to report on both desktop and mobile scores, but because we are moving into mobile only indexing, right? Mobile first indexing was a couple years ago now. And because we're now moving into mobile only indexing, which means you're going to be ranked and indexed based solely on your mobile version. My guess is that it's that the page experience update and the core vitals that are going into it, it's going to be based solely on that mobile experience.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Josh. And we've also had a question from Nitin, actually 2 questions from Nitin. The first question is this factor a site level or at a URL level? So are you being judged per URL, or is your entire kind of website score being judged here?
I saw something about this recently. I think that a similar question came on a Google Hangout, and John Mueller recently asked it, and somebody like Barry Schwartz recapped it on SCJ or something. And I don't remember exactly the answer was.
I want to defer to Josh if he has an actual fact. I just the gut instinct. My gut instinct is when we're getting into things at this level of granularity, my recommendation is always to zoom out. So we know that we're never going to find out exactly from Google what's going into your specific website. And we do know that the way different ranking factors are weighted will be individual for different domains. So there's no way to say exactly, I'm hoping, unless Josh comes at me with a fact and then I look like a fool, but pretty sure that we're never going to be able to say exactly. But if we zoom out and just say, right, the whole point of the Core Web Vitals update is to link SEO with UX. My question is your website one where individual URLs, individual landing pages are much more the core of your experience? Or are you threading a journey together, and do these pages have to work together in concert? Because that's the kind of behavioral metric I would expect Google to also be considering when they're making those sorts of weighting decisions. That's a gut instinct. I have to acknowledge and be humble.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would probably surmise as well. Let me see, Nitin, if I can find that resource, and then we'll all have one of our team, or I'll follow up with you directly afterwards.
The second question that Nitin had, which I think is very interesting, a good question. Will Google take a snapshot of Crux on the day of the launch and then apply those scores to a URL or site? Or do you expect a slow rollout for a site, like a percentage of pages per day, given that it's a 28-day kind of average?
This is a good question. It brings to my mind about crawl rate. So if I understand what you're asking, taking a snapshot of Crux and applying these scores to URL or site, do you expect a slow rollout for a site? I think that when it comes to a site and how fast it's going to be rolled out, how fast stuff's going to be applied to it, it's really going to depend on how much Google's crawling and how much traffic it actually gets. So lab data, which is what we're providing for you for every URL at scale, and what PageSpeed Insights is going to provide one at a time in data for you, that is not the ranking factor. That is just to help publishers understand a sense of how they're doing for a given page, trended over time compared to other pages on the site. And for those of you who may or might not be familiar with our segmentation feature, we can create segments to say, here's a set of pages that are from one CMS, here's another set that are from another templates. We can cross up with your core vitals and see if those correlate. I got off into a tangent because I wanted to talk about that. What I meant to say is it's the field data that you're actually being ranked on. And I know this for a fact because it was spoken to recently. If there is not enough field data, crux data for a page, like it's just not getting, you know, maybe it gets 20 visitors a month or something, and they're not able to get a sense for what that is, there's not going to be any crux or core web vitals ranking factor applied to those pages. If there's not enough data, it's not going to affect it positively, negatively, one way or the other. You're just going to look at other parts of the page experience. So over time, as they get more traffic and as your pages get crawled, right? Because especially if you've got really massive enterprise sites, Google's not crawling your whole site every day. So it really depends on your crawl rate. That's another good conversation to have with your CSM, your professional services person, because we can look at your logs. We can do crawl budget analyses for you with and without logs integration. We got some really powerful tools there. And so it really is going to depend on that.
Yeah, I just think everything you said made a lot of sense. And when we think about crawl budget, we're thinking about page bloat as well, right? Because they're obviously two sides of the same thing. So I think, again, it's really frustrating a lot of SEO conversations because the answer is it depends. But I think there's going to be no way to give one answer for every website. But we can absolutely help you figure out what we think the case might be in your particular situation. So.
Yeah, and there's no silver bullet in SEO either. That would completely take the fun out of it to a certain extent, right? There's no one thing that you can do, and it's not like if you improve your core web vitals, that doesn't mean that you're going to drive 20x more traffic than what you have done the previous month, because there are so many other factors. This is obviously just one part of it, but that is the fun of SEO. We've got a couple more questions before, and I think we should be then good on time. So we've got a question from Alex, who's asked, are you able to conduct lab tests with a warm cache versus lab tests with a cold cache using DeepCrawl to get a better understanding of user data?
How are we caching? This is something as well that I know that was discussed recently, and I don't remember because the engineers kind of own that, but I know that they've spoken to it recently.
I have to admit, off the top of my head, I won't be able to answer that one, but I can ask the engineering team.
Yeah, I think that's a good one for us to ask the engineering team on that.
Yep. I'll take that as my little to-do and get back to you. Thank you.
I think the answer is, oh God. Yeah, I want to say that we're not able to compare, if that's what you're asking. It's just that we only do one or the other, and I'm pretty sure it's a cold cache. Another note to mention.
I will half back you up on that, because I think that's true as well. I think we take the page as we see it. We don't store any kind of previous visits that we've had. So it's I'm pretty sure it's always cold. But it's an interesting use case, and it's something that we can definitely ask the team about.
And if it's a use case that is particularly useful to a number of our customers, it's one that we should be looking into. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
That's the benefit of having a product person here on the call, because she hears that, she goes, you know what, that's great, I'm going to take that.
Already wrote it down.
Already in ProdPad. We've also got a question from Brian, who asked, do you have any advice on how to compare Google Search Console results to what we're seeing in the DeepCrawl performance reports? Are there any data insights we might see differently in one or the other?
It's a really great question, because we have a great answer for it. Yes, so the data is going to be different, right? Partially because you're looking at lab and field data, but even if you're looking at lab and lab data in one of Google's tools, lab data, you're going to get just in page speed insights. They don't have lab data in Crux in GSE, but even that lab data is going to be different. And again, I talked about that partially because we are not throttling to emulated mobile broadband speed, but also, and I don't think we mentioned this, we are not rendering third-party scripts or images. So our LCP scores are going to be a little bit more generous, but it is directionally accurate And we are trending that data, and it is available at scale for every URL, and you can't get that anywhere else. One of the benefits, though, to make with that data, and this is where I like to talk about professional services and just Google Data Studio. We have free to anyone really, but it's not really going to be usable if you don't have a DeepCrawl account. We have free Google Data Studio Crux dashboard templates that anybody can access. If you don't know about those, ask your CSM and they'll share those with you. And those are plug and play. We have a Google Data Studio connector, which is plug and play, and it just connects your DeepCrawl crawl data. And so you can pull that into a Data Studio dashboard if you want. That can then be crossed with Crux data from GSC in that same dashboard if you like. We also have Crux dashboard templates that are free. What I think, and as a tech SEO, the best thing to do is use as much information as possible to make the best recommendations for your own site. So you've got one source lab data, another source field Crux data, and then you can kind of see directionally how you're doing and what that kind of gap of generosity is between lab and field, right? And then so you can kind of balance your different factors. Another thing that's really awesome is that we have a competitor Crux dashboard too. That just plugs into GSC because that is third-party available public data. You can see how you're comparing. Now that's not trended, that's a snapshot, right? Because it's not doing crawls like we're doing, but it is Crux field data. You can see in a snapshot from field data how you're doing versus your competitors. So there's a lot of stuff. So absolutely, we have GDS templates. Your CSM can show you where those are. I really think it's a great opportunity for a professional services engagement because then they can look at both of those. They can own the data for you. They can help make prioritized recommendations. If anybody on this call maybe doesn't, maybe understands what core vitals are, because that's kind of an easy concept that we're talking about today, but maybe it's like, okay, now what do I prioritize? That's a really great thing to take to a professional services tech SEO consultant. Yeah. Does that answer the question for you? Julia's got more as well, though.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, I'm glad that you mentioned the data connector because I think this again speaks to, we do need to overlay data from multiple sources and yeah, our data won't totally match what you're seeing in GSC for all the reasons. But we do want to make sure that exporting your data from DeepCrawl into however you prefer to work, whatever BI tool you're using, whether it is Data Studio, and you can use all these lovely templates we have, or if you're using something else, Power BI or whatever, we want to make sure that your data can be at least brought into an environment where you can do those comparisons and understand where things may or may not be aligning. So yeah, if you're curious about any of those, happy to also talk through some more of those tools if they're the right thing to help you.
I want to take this opportunity to expand on the BI connector. So Julie and I both talked about our Google Data Studio connector. We also have a BI connector, which connects through BigQuery. We're working on other integrations. I'm going to try and give this, but Julia could probably fill me in better. But we're working on other integrations, but BigQuery is one of the most versatile. So anybody that has a data scientist or is using tools like Tableau or Jupyter data science tools, any Python stuff, you've got any of these integrations and you're starting to look at your data more programmatically and other sources like that. DeepCrawl is a great source to bring into that because it's going to be your only one that has your technical SEO insights of how you're doing with indexability and crawlability, right? So we have a way to bring that in the same way that you're bringing your other tools into that, and that's through our BI connectors, so that you don't have to download our CSVs or reference our reports. You can bring that in through BigQuery and just use SQL calls. And we have a menu actually of some really easy SQL lines of code for anybody that doesn't know that, to make it really easy to call those. So you can kind of bring those in more programmatically to your other Tableau, Looker, or other sources.
Yeah, I think the scale at which a lot of the customers we work with are already thinking it's really not going to be feasible to be doing exports and manual transformations of your data. So yeah, it's a really great tool. That's all I want to add.
Awesome. I think we have time just for one more question. So we have a question from Anand. I don't know if it's the same Anand as before, but if it is, awesome. Thanks for all of the questions. Related to the above site versus page URLs for Crux Report, lots of sites have, thousands of pages, tens of thousands, millions of pages in some instances. So not all of them qualify as good by Google Field Data, or may have mobile usability issues. Will having some error pages have an impact on the overall site ranking, given the new page experience UI on Search Console? It seems to highlight that as a key hurdle to clear, e.g. having a secure website. So will having those errors, ultimately have an impact?
I think there's always going to be, short answer is that's clearly the direction that Google is nudging us, is to consider the overall experience. There will always be some discrepancy perhaps between what we see in reality and what the messaging is from Google, but I always see that as kind of Google starting to message us in the direction it wants us to go, even if our behavior in the real life data hasn't quite caught up yet. But, I think talking about usability issues and page experience, it would have to depend very much on the specifics. So I feel like I'm the it depends person today, and my apologies for that. But I think even if what you're seeing in your data, not today, in a month or so, is maybe you're not being dinged so badly for this or that, I would expect that to change over time because Google's setting a very clear direction for where its rankings are going to go. That would be my answer, but please fill in, Josh.
Well, I think too that almost nobody on the web is doing good right now. Some sites are, right? But we've got a lot of, y'all manage a lot of sites that are, have a lot of legacy code that's been stacked up on top of each other over years and years of different redesigns. Like only a brand new site, on a really clean CMS is going to qualify for good. So it's same as when Google started launching mobile first. That's why they roll it out over a couple of years, is because they knew that not everybody was doing good. So this is where I really think a competitor analysis is important. And that's something that your CSM can help you set up, just crawling your competitors and seeing how they're doing as well. Because they're probably not doing good either. And if all of you are doing equally not good, that's an opportunity, right? It's unlikely that, one of you is going to be doing better than all the others. And that's the only area that really there's going to be any ranking changes. But I'm trying to find, because this sounds kind of similar to, I think what Natine was asking about, if you've got some pages that are doing poor, is that going to affect your whole site authority, right? I put that in quotes because that's not an official Google construct. And I'm going to follow up if I can find that article that I read, but I really don't think that's the case. I think that they're going to rank URLs appropriately. Now, there might be some internal link authority or page rank, right? That's passed from poor ones to great ones. That'd be a great question for a Google Hangout. And I think we still might be transcribing those, but I think that there's, again, just to recap, it's a really good opportunity to do competitor analysis, but I don't think it's going to be something where Google's going to turn on the switch and just, kind of flip everybody down on day one, because they understand it's something that's going to need to be focused on for a while. And specifically to the question of is poor in one area going to affect the areas that are good? I highly doubt that. And that's what's kind of coming to my mind from what I read as well. If you've got areas of your site, parts of different CMS or higher priority pages that are performing better, those are going to rank appropriately based on that good experience. Because again, remember too, there's a lot of pages that don't even have enough data at all to even have any field data to be good or bad in terms of this. So it's going to be a transition, I think.
Yeah, I can almost imagine the tweets from John Mueller. I can almost start writing them in my head of, well, what's the core experience for your users? Is your journey, your core journey impacted by these pages? But I do think that there's something, a bit frustrating perhaps in, the fact that the way Google has laid out its bands is, this good, this medium, and this poor performance. And yet what Josh and I keep saying is it's all relative, and it's a zero-sum ranking, and it's about not about absolute performance. Yet the tooling and the way that Google is framing this issue is around absolute performance. So I can understand why there would be legitimate concern about what would this look like in reality. But in reality, we know you're competing against a certain group of competitors, and the good, the medium, and the poor, or average, or whatever language they're using on that specific metric, is Google's way of nudging us towards what they think good is or should be. And it may not be the reality in your specific context.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, really great insights. We're out of time. I think that we could probably sit here for another hour and field more questions and chat, but we've got to get on with our days and improve our sites. So couple of next steps to be aware of. Thanks everyone obviously for joining. There are if you do need to get in touch with the team, then please do reach out to your CSM or any of us, tweet us, email us, whatever. We'll see what we can do. There are ebooks. There is the complete guide to core web vitals that you can read up on. Highly recommend reading that. There's also some more around how should SEO leaders build, manage, and lead a world-class SEO team. Some great advice and tidbits in there. We've got some other webinars coming up. On the 10th of June, we've got one about accessibility, which is increasing in popularity and importance. And then at the end of June, we've got the true business value of SEO for marketing leaders. So really interesting webinars coming up. And also don't forget, there is a survey at the end of this. It should take less than 60 seconds to fill out, and it'll help us inform the content that we deliver for you moving forward as part of this series. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Josh, thanks Julia for your insights. Have a great rest of your week, and see you all soon.